What is your philosophy of technology? It's a big question. Big questions are often best approached through a series of smaller questions. In this case, smaller questions like, what can technology do for you and what can't it do? What is your optimum relationship with technology? How could technology amplify or improve your happiness, your well-being, and the well-being of others you care about? Answering questions like these will help you arrive at your philosophy of technology, a philosophy that will align with your values in ways that will help your work do better things for others as well as for yourself. You probably have doubts about your philosophy of technology. I've been thinking about mine for decades and I still have doubts. That's a good thing because your doubts are your best opportunity to find the deficiencies, the limitations in your philosophy of technology and improve them. But there's a risk, and the risk is that all around us is a very confident philosophy of technology, one we encounter practically every day, and that threatens to overwhelm our own developing sense of what technology is for and how it can be beneficial to ourselves and others. I call this the default philosophy of technology because we're likely to adopt it by default because it is ubiquitous, because we encounter it every day. We encounter it every day because the companies that sell us technology want us to adopt their philosophy of technology, because if we do, we will consume more of what they have to sell. This is absolutely fair. This is what marketing is. I'm not questioning technology's companies' right to promote their technology in this way. I'm rather asking us, you and me, to recognize what we're being sold, to accept those elements of it that are sound, and to question others and substitute our own ideas for those we're being sold. I want to help you recognize this philosophy of technology, so I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, you've probably met someone who says something like, technological change is coming, it's our job to get ready for it. That's why I'm an early adopter, I'm a technology optimist, I'm a technophile. I try to keep ahead by staying on top of all the latest technology. Such a person is also likely to contrast another kind of personality. And such a person is likely to characterize the more selective person as a technophobe, as somebody who is a fearful Luddite, afraid of change and resistant to change. And when you encounter this binary between the technophile and the technophobe, you are encountering some of that default philosophy of technology, because tech companies like us to be technophiles. But I think it's obvious, if you think about it, that we must all be very selective about our technology, both the technology that we adopt and the way in which we use it. We must be selective about it. And just because we're selective does not make us phobic or Luddites. Rather, it means that we are exercising the judgment that it is our job as adults to exercise in this world. So the technophile, technophobe binary is a symptom of this default philosophy of technology. Another default philosophy of technology, or another element of it, is the supposition that because a technology is the latest thing, the state of the art, high tech, and the most technologically sophisticated, it is also therefore best. Now, there's no question that sometimes the best technology for a specific job is also the most sophisticated and the latest. But there is by no means any necessary connection between these things. Notice the word advanced. It kind of conflates these two versions of sophisticated. One is we apply it to the most sophisticated technology, but the word advanced also implies that it is the best, superior to its predecessors. You know, I think from experience, that actually sometimes simple technologies, low-tech things, even zero-tech approaches can sometimes be the best. Not always, but sometimes. Situationally, a bicycle can be better than a car. Situationally, an electric fan, because of its low energy consumption, its simplicity, its ease of maintenance, its affordability, can make it better than an air conditioner, even though the air conditioner is more advanced. Now, there's a third symptom, a third element of this default philosophy of technology that I'd like to commit most of my time to, because I think it may be the most important and also the least appreciated. Technology companies would like us to think of the words tool and the word solution as synonyms. And in fact, it's become the norm to hear these words used as synonyms in everyday conversation. That did not just happen. Until about 50 years ago, nobody ever called a technology a solution. They would like us to think of these things as synonyms, and specifically, they would like us to think of a solution as like a tool, but better. Now, if you really think about what a tool is and what a solution is, I think you'll recognize that these are, in fact, closer to being antonyms than synonyms. Let me explain. When you have a tool, you chose the tool for the job that you needed to do, and the problem that you were solving was a problem you solved with the tool. You solved the problem with the tool. That makes you the agent of your own problem solving. But when a technology is marketed to you, and when we are sometimes agree that a technology is a solution, we are no longer the agents of change. We are reduced to the passive beneficiaries of the technology's change. Now, this is actually a very tempting possibility, and it's one reason why this word has proliferated. If the technology solved the problem, then I, as the person who got this technology, am no longer responsible, because the responsible party is the agent of the action. And in this case, we're proposing that the technology is the agent of this change. But I want you to notice, if we take the human user out of that agency position and make the technology the agent, suddenly responsibility for technology becomes unclear, ambiguous. We can have a useful technology, like, for example, opioids, which are useful under expert care by a physician as pain relief medication. It can become an all-purpose solution, at which point doctors diminish their responsibility for the effects of the opioid. Patients do too, and the result is you have an opioid epidemic. You can see the same thing happening with antibiotics. Antibiotics are a profoundly important, life-saving tool in the hands of an expert user who knows the right antibiotic to prescribe for a given bacterial infection in a given patient. But because antibiotics got recast as all-purpose solutions, people, sometimes even physicians, part of the problem, we now have antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We have superbugs. So it's not a question of the technology being dangerous or deficient. It's rather a question of the responsibility for its use having been lost, in part thanks to this notion that the technology is the solution instead of merely a tool in the hands of a responsible user. There is an attraction, though, to this version of technology. There's an attraction that we are susceptible to when technology is sold to us as a solution. It promises us effort minimization, including physical effort minimization and cognitive effort minimization. And that's a relief. In a busy world, we want cognitive effort minimization. We want physical effort minimization. The trouble is, if we take those two trends to their logical extreme, we can imagine technology leading us to a world with zero cognitive effort required. You can already see AI being marketed in this way. It's not the fault of the AI, it's the fault of the marketing. Zero physical effort exertion as well. And also a solution for all of the unused time that comes to us by having all of our physical and cognitive effort reduced to zero with unlimited entertainment. Now, all of those three propositions have great market value to the people selling them. They would like us to pursue unlimited minimization, including physical and cognitive effort minimization. And they would like us to fill the void with entertainment that we purchase from them. But this will not deliver happiness. This will deliver a kind of hell, a kind of pointless misery. Because the truth is, we know, both from psychology research, for example, from Albert Bandura, one of the most cited psychologists in the history of the discipline, but also from common sense and from experience, that happiness does not come from freedom from any effort. It rather comes from purposeful effort. And purposeful effort means putting us back into the sentence as the agent of problem solving, whereby you and I solve our problems with tools. An example, when a child learns to walk for the first time, they are exerting much more physical effort and much more cognitive effort than when they were carried or pushed in a stroller. And yet, all of you, I think, have had the experience of witnessing a child just taking her first steps. And at first, the concentrated cognitive effort followed by beaming joy. I can remember this personally in learning to ride a bicycle as a small child, at first with training wheels. And I thought of those training wheels as a solution. I wanted them there forever. That was my way of freeing myself from the frightening cognitive burden of learning to balance the bike and the frightening physical skill required to balance the bike as well. But I had a caring parent who was smart enough to recognize that training wheels misperceived as a solution will actually diminish my happiness. So he took those training wheels off and said, "I think you're ready." I cried and objected, but finally, with the training wheels no longer accessible to me, I rode the bike, and after a couple of skinned knees, I balanced. And I felt a kind of joy that I still feel today, decades later, whenever I ride a bike. This is what happens when we put ourselves in the position of solving our own problems. Albert Bandura, the psychologist I mentioned a moment ago, calls this self-efficacy. When you can solve your own problems, or when you can solve another person's problems using your skill, when you develop your skill because you had to exercise cognitive and physical effort to develop them, such that you have something to offer others to solve their problems and to do for yourself, or when you can collaborate together, you can achieve a kind of real happiness that technology does have to offer, as long as we recognize technology only as tools and actually never as solutions. The happiest statement you can hear a child say is, "I did it all by myself." You can remember this perhaps with learning to tie your own shoes. Well, "I did it by myself," or "I did it with a tool," is a true expression of happiness. It can also be in the plural. In other words, "we did it together" is another expression of real happiness. I'm at George Mason University as I speak this. He wrote a sentence that Thomas Jefferson, the founder of the university I work at, the University of Virginia, adapted into a sentence you've all heard before. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." There's a philosophy in there, and it's a philosophy that's inconsistent with that default philosophy of technology I told you about before, because it is your pursuit of happiness enabled by your liberty, by your agency, by your being the subject of that sentence, by your being the agent of that action, that promises the happiness that is yours to pursue, as long as you recognize that you are the agent of your own happiness, and tools are there as a means of helping you to achieve it for yourself, but never as a solution that absolves you of this kind of responsibility. I'd like to close by showing you what I think of as a symbol of what technology has to offer us. These are training wheels. When I was a child, I mistook them for a solution. I thought as long as I had this solution, I never had to learn to ride a bike, and my bike would forever stay upward. Thanks to that caring parent who took these training wheels away from me, I was compelled to realize that these are merely a tool that, used properly, helped me develop the skill, the physical skill, the cognitive skill to balance the bike for myself, to solve my own problems, and thereby to achieve self-efficacy. Now, I asked you at the beginning of this talk, what is your philosophy of technology? I cannot answer that question for you, but I can suggest to you that you must not let technology companies answer that question for you either. You must answer it for yourselves on the basis of your own values, your own experience, and your own study. But whatever your answer is, let it be consistent with the psychology research that has definitively established that your happiness requires your agency, your purposeful effort, both physical and cognitive. Thank you very much.